Let's speak with Baroness Claire Fox, who's not in the sea, as far as I can tell. Claire, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. Look, it was. I think there's a certain element of relief, isn't there, for the people of Clacton that this thing is over. Nigel Farage will be glad it's over. They're back on track. It's whatever way people slice it. I've spoken to the Tories this morning. They've got the hump about it. Edwina Currie thought it was a sham. She would say that, wouldn't she? Etc. The bottom line is, it was a by-election. He won, and he won convincingly.
Indeed. I think that a number of lessons can be learned from this, though. I do think that the fact that none of the mainstream parties stood does show, as I know previous guests have said, a certain degree of contempt for the voters of Clacton. And, you know, imagine a situation where we keep telling people how important democracy is, but when you get the opportunity to test yourself, to hold Nigel Farage and Reform to account, because if you stand against him, then you're involved in a debate with him in front of the electorate, that they kind of decided that the way to deal with Reform was to isolate him. And I think even more despicable was the way that we had actually some of those parties and, in fact, swathes of the media backing Binface. You know, thought this was such a joke, right?
Yeah.
Oh, what we can do is we can make a mockery of Reform. We can humiliate Nigel Farage, you know, all of these things by basically saying vote for Binface. Isn't it a hoot? There was a very weird situation yesterday where one of the major newspapers in this country, the Telegraph of all people, invited on William Clouston from the SDP, at least a serious candidate standing, had him on for 2 minutes, and then had Count Binface on for 15 minutes.
Wow.
Doing an interview. I mean, you just
the world has gone bonkers. I completely agree with you, Claire. Although we obviously had some fun, and it lends itself to a bit of satire, and the fact that it was a bin on his face rather than anything else, again, yielded some humorous comments and commentary. I get that. Ultimately, however, I hated it. I really did. I hated the idea that this is what we'd reduced a serious by-election to.
Exactly. I mean, that's the point I'm making, that, you know, I can't blame Reform for this. I think I understood the instinct of Nigel Farage saying he wanted the main people to judge him on his conduct to be the electorate. I think that's a fine democratic spirit.
Yeah.
By the way, that doesn't mean that he won't have to be answerable to a standards committee, but I think the fact that he made clear this notion that actually ultimately who runs Britain are the voters, you know, who's in charge of MPs, it's the voters rather than committees in Parliament. I think that was a fair point. I do think there was some jeopardy when all of the parties decided not to stand. And the point I'm making, which is a broader one, I suppose, is that the way that the mainstream seem to want to deal with Reform is to delegitimise them, to treat them with total disdain, to try and turn Reform into a joke party. Now, listen, there's all sorts of criticisms that one can have about Reform. There's all sorts of criticisms that one can have of Nigel Farage. That's all legitimate and should be, in a democracy, part of the discussion. But I think you made an interesting point earlier, Ian, when you said what Reform represents is the spirit of people desperately wanting change.
Correct.
Genuine upheaval of the status quo.
Yep.
Feel constantly that they're ignored, that they're sidelined, that the major issues of the day are brushed under the carpet, that even jolly Andy Burnham and his national tour, you know, that there's something about his rather glib attitude to politics that people aren't buying as yet. I mean, we'll see more broadly. But anyway, what Reform represents is that spirit. They might not be the perfect embodiment of a kind of popular desperation for things to change. The social contract in this country has completely collapsed. People do not believe the state have got their back, that they will protect them in terms of crime.
Yep.
They don't believe the prison crisis is being dealt with properly, and of course migration and the endless lack of control of the borders, and so on and so forth. So what Reform represents for voters is a vehicle through which they can express that dissatisfaction. And therefore, when the mainstream parties try and treat reform as though they're the kind of dirty, kind of beneath contempt, deplorable gammon types, right? And disgusting and not worth engaging with and corrupt and so on and so forth. What they're doing is they're slapping the faces of the voters' aspirations. That's the problem.
I would like to think that even a good Labour politician and a good Tory politician, if you got them quietly over a couple of beers and a crafty smoke, they would say, actually, yeah, we do need change, because I think the status quo, the groupthink that snakes its way around our political system and our civil service is, I mean, it's out of control. It's obscene and laughable in equal measure, perhaps, but it's that, isn't it? It's that, oh, this is how we've all done it. Immigration is the greatest example, Claire. I was watching that one of the Brexit documentaries. There's been a few, obviously, because of the 10 years on. When Boris Johnson was asked to engage in the campaign that he fronted, and the issue of immigration came up, he discombobulated. He didn't have an opinion on it. He didn't care about immigration. It was not on his radar. David Cameron didn't care about immigration. Wasn't on his radar. Theresa May didn't care about immigration. We've had this success, and Labour, of course, it speaks for itself. They've never cared about immigration. So you have this group thing, and they've completely lost the plot, and not just misread the room, but I mean completely misread it in a criminal sense of the word. How many examples do they have to see before these two parties, two major parties, one the most successful in Western democracy in history, the Tories, but what does it take for them to see it? I mean, they're playing a bit of catchy up now, but it's curious that they seem to be, their attack on Nigel Farage, the underpinning attack is that they're not a genuine party and they're a bit of a joke.
Yeah, I think the point is you're right that they're doing a little bit of playing to catch up, and I think we saw that Shabana Mahmood has made, as the Home Secretary, has made some, the right noises in relation to slightly tightening up the illegal migration and so on, and the number of deportations has gone up, those kind of things. But you don't, and then we know that to be fair, the Conservative Party have said that we're going to have to leave the European Court of Human Rights and so on and so forth. So I appreciate that the noises are being made, but let me just point out to you that catching up has happened because the public, the voters, the electorate have made their position so clear via reform. I mean, that's why they've had to catch up. So in some ways, what they did was they ignored this situation, and you don't really feel that they've got under the skin of what people's concerns are. And the concerns are security. The concerns are just the sheer frustration of having voted endlessly, that control of our borders. I mean, you can't be a nation state if you don't control your own borders, if you don't know who's in your country, if you can't remove people from the country. That is not a nation state. So when we talk about national sovereignty, voting for more control, that's what people anticipated would happen. And everyone went along with it, but they were very snippy, and they thought that this actually belied a racist, xenophobic attitude. And
absolutely.
As a consequence, they've basically done a little bit of superficial, shallow tinkering to keep the voters shut up.
Yeah.
But they're not serious, and that's why people are acting the way they are. And that's all I'm saying is it's not about reform the party, it's about the voters and what they want.
Absolutely right. Everything from, 80,000 people appearing on your shores in 2 years to police knocking on your door for something you wrote on Facebook. It's all it's all of that shift in kind of insanity that people want to move. Bit of breaking news, Claire, since we've been speaking, the investigation into Nigel Farage's donations has now been reopened, because when he stood down, of course, the investigation was paused as per the allegations currently under investigation by the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner. This pause has now been undone, according to the Commons website. So that will go ahead for reasons I can't fathom. It's going to probably take months. I reckon it could be done in half an hour. But don't let expediency be part of a conversation when it comes to parliamentary procedure.
No, I mean, I'm in Parliament too, and of course there are rules, but one can't but feel that a huge amount of political energy is going into this. And in terms of priorities, I wish that the energy would go elsewhere.
Yeah.
I thought it was, just following on from our previous conversation, I thought it was amusing that Andy Burnham thought the way that we should deal with the situation of asylum seekers being dumped in the northwest and northern towns and places that have not got much money to dump them in places that are wealthier, as though that, talk about missing the point.
Yes.
Now imagine if the same energy that's being put into kind of getting Farage was put into, for example, resolving the prison crisis, or for example, working out exactly what you're going to do in terms of getting out of the refugee convention that means that we have to treat everybody who steps foot on the soil of the UK as though they've got a legitimate asylum claim. All of these things are somehow, we haven't got time for that, but we've got a huge amount of energy for investigating Farage's financial situation.
It is again, which does feed back to exactly where we began this conversation about the sort of upside down, insane world we found ourselves living in. Common sense has gone out of the window, but it's plentiful in your neck of the woods, Claire, and thank goodness for that. Great to have you on with us, Baroness Claire Fox, independent peer and director at the Academy of Ideas.